Welcome to Agatha Christie She Watched, our spoiler-heavy look at the movie and TV adaptations of the mystery genre's greatest writer. I'm Bill Peschel of Peschel Press, publisher of the annotated novels of Agatha Christie, and today we're talking about creepy flashbacks, old-fashioned tugboats, rock climbing, and the workings of fate. It's Desyat Negrityat, the 1987 Soviet Union version of 10 Little Indians. But first, let me introduce my partner in marriage, as well as crime of the fictional kind, Teresa Peschel. Teresa, how you doing?
Hi. Did you practice saying that in Russian? Ooh, say that again.
Desyat Negrityat.
Ooh. That just sounds sexy when you say it, even though I know it's not. But then you know what they say about people writing their laundry lists and shopping lists in French, and it automatically sounds sexy because it's French. It's a different language.
Oh, absolutely.
Remember that sequence in A Fish Called Wanda with John Cleese and Jamie Lee Curtis?
Yes, she discovered he spoke Russian, and he just went through the entire Russian language while she was just, oh.
So say the name again for our audience at home.
Offend any of the Russian speakers out there saying, no, that's not how you pronounce it.
No matter what Wikipedia said.
Or Google Translate.
Oh, Google Translate?
Google Translate, yes. Desyat Negrityat. I won't try to spell it, but it is 10 Little Indians, and as we found out, this is the most faithful adaptation. We're going to have to redo the scores for the book now that you've seen all 10. Is that it?
Yes, we have now seen, folks, 10 adaptations of 10 Little Indians. You start in 1946 or so. 1945 with the very first one. That is still one of the best, because after that they declined in quality precipitously until you got around to this one and then Sarah Phelps. But they are, for those of you keeping track at home, there's the 1945 one with the director whose name, of course, I can't remember anymore.
Renee Clare.
Then there is the Kinescope from 1959, which managed to compress the entire novel in 55 minutes, and they did a damn good job. That Kinescope was, as terrible as the quality of the film was, it was still an amazing adaptation.
And you're talking about the recording quality of it, because it was a Kinescope.
Recording quality was absolutely atrocious, but it was so well acted and so well scripted, they could shoot it today as is and have a 55-minute presentation of 10 Little Indians. So we saw that one. That was like 1959. Mm-hmm. There are two in 1965. The one with Hugh O'Brien and Elkie Summer. No, not Elkie Summer. Hugh O'Brien and some blonde flavor of the month in a schloss. And then also in 1965 is Gumnam, which is the Bollywood version, which is real different. Then you move to 1974, where they have Oliver Reed and Elkie Summer in this Iranian mansion surrounded by hundreds of thousands of miles of desert.
It was a hotel next to an archaeological site.
Yes.
And try to figure that one out.
A stunning hotel. You wonder who on earth cleaned that pile, because you see two servants, and they de-sexed Oliver Reed and Elkie Summer, who should have lit up the screen, and they had all of the appeal of oatmeal or sand. And then you move on to the worst of them all, which is probably the worst of them all, although there are moments when you could see what could have been a great movie struggling to get out. And that's the one with Frank Stallone set in the African Veldt.
1989.
And then you leap forward to this one. The Russian version in 1987, and this is the last version that we're seeing, even though we've seen others, but there's this one. And then there is Sarah Phelps' version, which combined aspects of the novel with the stage play. She followed the novel fairly closely, but she used aspects of the stage play in the confrontation between Vera and the judge, because in the novel, no one ever knows. Then there was the Japanese version, which was remarkably faithful to the novel in terms of the plot and the fact that they involved the police. They turned it into a police procedural. That is the only one that we have seen that actually involves any policeman showing up at the scene of the crime afterwards and saying, what on earth happened?
There's the French version.
Oh, that's right. That's right. The French version has the policeman and the policewoman.
And they're actually actively investigating it, so you almost wonder, how quickly can they get to the island?
That's right. That's right. So there's the Japanese one, then there's the French one, and then we had to go back in time to go back to Russia for this one, the last of our foreign adaptations, if I have that correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or certainly the last one that we're actually going to podcast.
Yeah, that we can access, because that's always a problem, is finding them, and also finding them with an English translation.
Oh yes, and this one had a pretty good English subtitles. You could see that there were some issues with the transcript in terms of getting the grammar right, or the sentence structure wasn't right. But you didn't get the feeling that you were missing too much of the nuance. And with some of the subtitled ones, especially the Indian ones, I really had the strong sensation that I was missing a lot of stuff that I should have understood, and I didn't.
Well, there was a love scene, for example, that the guy's trying to get the girl drunk, trying to get Kitty drunk, and he's saying, and then we'll have the confrontation, and you're thinking, that's not quite the right word. Whatever you're trying to say, that's just not quite right.
Oh yeah, that was Gumnam.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very strange one, folks. That one is very strange.
Yes.
But so here we are with the last of 10 Little Indians. Other than the police epilogues, it covered virtually everything in the novel and managed to do it in 2 hours and 17 minutes is what you have written down on my cheat sheet here.
Yep.
They really covered a huge amount of ground. They did it quickly. They did it thoroughly. Other than dropping the police and having Justice Wargrave do a voiceover instead of somebody reading his message in a bottle, the only two changes that they made are, I'm not sure what kind of a gun Lombard had, whether it was a pistol or a revolver. I've seen so many versions, and he's carried all kinds of guns, all kinds of handguns. And we actually see, and this is not in the novel, but it turned out in the stage play, we see Vera have an assignation with Lombard. But I think it worked in this case because Vera is an opportunist. She's not that nice a girl. She is an opportunist. I could accept this. I could accept that she went after Lombard because, well, let me start back at the beginning. Our 8 victims arrive at the Sparrow's Nest, which is a mansion on the very edge of a cliff in Crimea. They didn't have to CGI any of that water. You wonder really how on earth they built that place. And it is an amazing little architectural gem.
Now, there's a little bit of a thing about this because when I looked it up online, I looked up Sparrow's Nest, and it looks more like a conventional castle. Whereas what we're seeing is maybe the building with the crenellations removed. It's really hard. I didn't look close enough, but it definitely does not look like a castle. This is set in the Crimea. The Sparrow's Nest is in the Crimea. They have an area noted for all these high rocky outcroppings. So
that are very difficult for people to pull up boats to.
Yeah, very difficult for boats, but you can access it by land, and it's apparently a tourist location. It's a tourist trap. If you go.
So you can visit it, folks.
You can visit it. You look at it on Google Earth, and there's not a walkthrough by Google Earth, but somebody posted photos, and you look around, and it looks like any other tourist trap. There's people wandering around and eating ice cream and selling balloons. It's not at all looking like this.
Not at all looking like this, but this looks absolutely fabulous.
Yeah.
The setting is so perfect because it really does heighten the isolation. So you see our folks arrive in the most wonderful little ferry boat that is so not English. I just can't tell you how not English that little ferry boat was. There was just something about the prow. I hope I'm still using my Navy terms correctly. There was something about the way that the prow was shaped, the painting on the sides of the boat, just the whole shape of the boat. That was not an English boat.
Yeah,
there was a local boat that they were using.
Yeah, there's a cabin in the back sticking up, and it has this stovepipe sticking up, belching black smoke. And I swear it looked like something, if you remember the old Popeye movie with Robert Altman and Robin Williams, it probably looked something like out of that.
That was an amazing little boat, and I probably will not be able to identify what ship that is, but that little boat deserves to have her name remembered as one of the stars of 10 Little Indians. What a wonderful boat that was. And so our hero...
they literally drop them off at what looks like a concrete pier at the bottom
at the base of
100-foot cliff of bare rock.
Yes, with a staircase that has that this place is totally not ADA accessible in any way, shape, or form unless you are flown in by a helicopter. At least what you see on the film. As you say, it's at the end of a peninsula with a tourist trap outside, so I'm sure they do make ADA accommodations now. There's our heroes carrying their luggage, although not all of them. Emily Brent, spinster, did not carry her luggage. A sailor in his striped black and white jersey and tight pants and a little Russian Dixie cup hat was carrying it up the stairs for her, like, you know, you're looking at what looks like 4 flights of stairs to go snaking back and forth along the side of the cliff.
That. It's not just 4 flights. It looks like it went on endlessly, and you have one suspended wire on the outside keeping you from falling
Hopefully
off.
you don't slip and fall under the barrier.
Right.
But the characters start showing who they are almost right away, and they're pretty well distinguishable too. Vera is obvious. Rogers and his wife, Mrs. Rogers, are very obvious. Emily Brent is the only other woman on the island, and she lets you know right away that she disapproves of you because you are simply never going to measure up to her standards. Thank you very much. And she has no self-doubt and is fully justified in everything that she does, and she's actually rather true to the novel. I would say, in fact, that the thing that they cut back the most was the internal monologues of the characters, which is hard to do on film, where they are feeling guilt. And Emily Brent she's having a hard time keeping up the barriers of righteousness and self-justification as she thinks about poor Beatrice Taylor, her housemaid who was clean and willing and worked hard and somehow met a boy, and obviously it was all her fault, even though it is perfectly plausible that Beatrice Taylor was taken advantage of or raped by some man, and because she was pregnant, it was her fault. Absolutely, without a doubt, and as a good Christian, God-fearing woman, Emily Brent couldn't throw that pregnant housemaid out fast enough, proving that she has never actually...
She was not a Christian.
She is not a Christian.
Not a Christian.
No matter what she says, she is not a Christian because she does not understand Christian charity.
Yes, and that is the thing. There's one of those cases where you do say, what would Jesus do? And you know Jesus would not do that.
Yes, Jesus would not have done that. But you meet Emily Brent, you meet the judge, you meet Armstrong the doctor. He is the one, interestingly, when everybody is settling themselves into the hotel and starting to discover that their hosts are not there, he's the one who's playing the piano. It is not Anthony Marsden, professional party guest, whom we have seen in numerous adaptations. He's the one who sits down at the piano and plays. No, in this case, it is the doctor playing while Anthony dances with Vera, and she doesn't look really happy about it. She looks uncomfortable.
Because he is putting the moves on her.
Oh, definitely.
He'd say, I didn't want to come here until 10 minutes ago.
When saw her.
When I saw her, and she's like reacting, oh, God.
Oh, God, I'm going to have to be nice to this guy because I'm Mrs. Owen's secretary, and I have to be nice to this man, and I don't have a choice. You don't have much choice as a servant, and when Vera signed on as a secretary to give her a holiday post because she is currently games mistress at some third-rate school, that's what's in the text. A holiday post means that she is not basically eating cheese sandwiches and drinking water and staying in her little one room at the school. She's earning a little bit of money. She's not having to eke out her pennies at the school waiting for the term to open when she'll start getting paid again. So here she is. She has to be nice to the other guests to keep that holiday post. So you meet Anthony Marsden, who is that white suit and the red scarf, very striking. You meet Lombard and Blore, who are both...
It took us a while to tell them apart.
It took us a while to tell them apart. Blore is blonder with more balding. Lombard is darker hair. But they both have kind of this foxy look, kind of a sharp vulpine face. Their characterization was really interesting because pretty much everybody followed the script. Except what we have seen in so many of these adaptations is that Blore in particular can be really changed around because we have seen adaptations where he is a comic figure. He is essentially a comic fool. Here, he's not an idiot. He is not a comic fool at all. He does make mistakes. He jumps to conclusions on a regular basis, but he seems very active. He's very energetic. He is trying to figure out, once they start realizing what's happening, he is the one who is trying to work out hypotheses along with the judge. It's not Lombard. Lombard stays more in the background, watching what's going on. But they're both, you can tell, men of action, and they are both once Anthony Marsden dies, and of course Rogers doesn't count because he's the butler and a servant, they're the 2 youngest men on the island. They're not young. They're probably in their 30s, which means that they still have the muscle to do what they need to do, and they have the experience to know what to do. The doctor is, of course, in his 50s. General Maxwell looks like he's in his 60s. The judge is in his 60s. You know, they're older men. And so when you see Vera come on to Lombard, you see a woman who is thinking, who is the most likely to get me out of here alive? And who is the person who did not speculate about my guilt initially, which is what Blore did. She recognizes that she might be able to seduce Lombard more easily and have him maybe take it on faith that she is a damsel who needs rescuing. It is really interesting watching the different characterizations of Blore. He was very different here than we've seen in virtually every other adaptation, and I would say the closest would be the Sarah Phelps, because that Blore was not as much of an activist, but again, he knew kind of what he was doing, and he and Lombard developed this sort of joshing relationship. They were paired off, and they were paired off here too. They were the ones who were most likely to work together, as though they each recognized the other as being a capable predator.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I'm reading too much into this, but
no,
you think of
so.
Blore and Lombard looking at the doctor and thinking, fat old man. They're looking at the general and thinking, ancient geezer who cannot run around the island. Or the judge, he's old and of a different class, not someone that they can work with.
We also noticed how well the judge worked at manipulating the other guests into thinking the way that he wants them to think. There was a particular scene in the middle there.
Oh, yes. Because this film follows the novel, you will never see the judge confront Vera the way he does in the stage play and in most of the film variations. Vera never learns who did it. The Japanese one is probably the next closest. The French one, 2 of the characters did kind of find out what was going on, and you saw the confrontation. Here, you never see it. When the judge throws Armstrong over the palisade of Sparrow's Nest into the raging seas below, Armstrong does probably get an idea of just who did it, and he had about 2 seconds to realize, oh my God, I was splat. Yeah. But this judge, it is a devious performance. And this is also what's very interesting, and this is true to the novel, but not the stage play. You see him manipulating everyone, making sure everyone feels anxious, upset, worried, frightened, panic-stricken, but you do not see on screen his seduction of the doctor. Instead, the only thing you get is after the fact, when everyone is dead and the judge is doing his recap before he shoots himself, that he picked the doctor as the right patsy. And you see one short scene where and this is a flashback, where he talked the doctor into doing what he wanted. But in most of the other films, you see a long seduction scene between the doctor and the judge. Not here.
I think it was the 45 version. They played it out on the pool table.
Yeah, they did that there. They did it in 1965 with the Hugh O'Brien film. Mm-hmm. I know that they did it in the 1974 one. I can't remember in the African Safari one in 1989 with Donald Pleasance, but I know we did see a lot of this I'm pretty sure that I'm remembering correctly, we saw this with the Sarah Phelps one.
Mm-hmm.
But of course it was not in the French movie because they changed it around so much, and it wasn't in Gumnam. Mm-hmm. That took place off stage, and it wasn't in the Japanese one either, because the Japanese one, for all its changes, they played very straight to the plot itself.
Yeah, but I think there's the telling scene near the beginning where they're all kind of figuring this out, and the judge is leading them up the path.
Down the primrose path.
Down the primrose path, because it occurs to me, and after you see these a couple of times, you kind of think, what would happen otherwise? How would you do this? How would you get out of this thing? It's like with Roger Ackroyd. I joked with you about what Roger really should have done, and if he did just one thing.
Yes, if Dr. Shepard would have done one thing different, and that is just told Caroline, I need to go out for a walk.
Mm-hmm. And then just come in through the window, which he had unlocked.
Yes, he had left the window unlocked. He could have stolen the dictaphone and then disappeared, and then they would have found the staff would have found Roger Ackroyd in the morning, and he would have been clear, and we would not have had a novel.
We wouldn't have had the novel. But here, nobody ever considered who would know all the information about these people? Because you're talking about somebody who ran down 2 kids. You talked about somebody who abandoned 20 native soldiers in Africa. And who was the most likely person?
Yes,
and the judge led them away from that.
Yes, the judge led them away from that. The judge led them away from thinking, how could one person learn all of these facts about all 10 people on the island, and who had the money to pay for all of this? And they did actually use the phrase mad millionaire.
Mm-hmm.
Watching the judge's speeches, you see him carefully manipulating them so that they panic and stop thinking.
And they mistrust each other.
And so that, yes,
that
was a big part, is they mistrusted each other. Very much so. They were all on edge, and none of them felt that they could trust anyone else. And as people start dying, Anthony Marsden first with the poison cocktail, and then Mrs. Roger not waking up. Several people, including the judge, point out that the doctor is the one who gave the dose to Mrs. Rogers.
Yeah.
You don't see that somebody could have put a second dose for when she woke up.
Yeah, while she was still asleep, you just inject her with another one.
Yeah, you just inject her with another one, and if you slip up the nightgown and do it in the thigh, the doctor's not going to be doing an autopsy on the spot, and he isn't going to see it.
Mm-hmm. Well, it also puts pressure on the doctor, so he'd be more likely to fall in with the judge's plan.
Oh, yes, would, because the doctor is under pressure. He's under suspicion.
Mm-hmm. Well, especially after Mrs. Brent gets it in the neck with a hypodermic needle.
Yes, and a dead bumblebee caught in her veil.
Very nice touch there.
Very, very nice touch. There was a lot to like about this. And I did mention, like I said, Vera getting into bed with Lombard. And again, I could see this because she is looking for someone who is going to protect her, and she doesn't trust Blore, or rather she distrusts Lombard less than she distrusts Blore, or she thinks, based on what she is seeing, because Lombard is more of a shadowy figure, that she could more easily manipulate Lombard. And as he tells her, when she says, "Oh, I'll scream," if you were going to scream, you wouldn't have come half naked to my bedroom door late at night. So get over to that bed, woman, which he doesn't say, but
it's pretty close enough.
But he's not wrong.
Yeah.
He's not wrong. I mean, she shows up dressed for seduction, which she succeeds at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, there was another thing concerning Vera with her peer boyfriend as well that we notice as well. It's pretty nice. Because, we have to explain what ends up happening here. And I made this comparison before, is that if the French version was a slasher movie version of Then There Were None, this is more of a psychological thriller because 3 of the people have visitations in the night of their victims. We have Vera, who's thinking about the boy that
Cyril, whom she drowned. We saw Emily Brent. She was so upset by her vision of Beatrice Taylor, she threw her Bible at the plate glass window. Because
she was knocking on the outside.
Yeah, because drowned Beatrice. Remember, Beatrice drowned herself. So there's the rain beating on the glass, and she throws her Bible at the spirit of Beatrice to make her go away. And we see Lombard having a middle-of-the-night nightmare about the men he abandoned.
And it was really done well. I actually jumped. He was running through the jungle trying to avoid the natives who he left behind, abandoned them, and he falls into this water, this stream, and he figures, he's going to try to cross. And this is how you do Gundam right, because they had the butler rising from the table as if suspended and a sheet falling away. This one had one of the natives popping up out of the water like that. And I admit, I was like, I had to laugh nervously because he was just right out of nowhere. That was so well done.
Yeah, and you do not get a flashback for the general. The general explains what he did.
Yep.
And he feels guilt. Rogers self-justifies. Mrs. Rogers, all you know is that she feels guilty. Anthony Marsden says, I lost my license because of those 2 damn kids who are in the road that I ran over, and speed is the way of the future, and you should just get used to it. Because as long as, he's doing the running over and it's nobody he knows getting run over, what does he care?
It's like with the general and Marsden, they both accepted their guilt. I mean, the general he does that famous talk, as you see in all the versions, where he's just sitting there waiting to get killed.
He's waiting.
He's tired.
He's tired. He's tired. It's a different acceptance of his guilt than Marsden. The general feels guilt. Marsden is more like a cat. He doesn't care.
Yeah.
His only concern is that you noticed. There is no guilt. He feels no guilt. Let's see, like I said, Rogers self-justifies. Emily Brent gets a visitation and self-justifies. Blore, we get some self-justification, including the fact that he didn't get paid enough, but you never see a flashback.
Yeah.
The judge, you don't get much one way or the other than self-justification. He was doing his duty. Vera, you get flashbacks. Lombard, you get flashbacks. Dr. Armstrong, you get kind of not much. You know, I was a little hungover and the patients come to me too late.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't get some of what you've seen in some of the other films. But again, 2 hours and 17 minutes, and they choose different things to emphasize.
But the one that we liked most that was really interesting was Vera and her boyfriend.
Yes, this was a wonderful scene. The reason why Vera murders Cyril in pretty much all of the versions, except the French one.
10.
Except the French one. But in all the versions that are true to the novel, the reason why Vera murders Cyril is because Hugo, her boyfriend, is Cyril's uncle. And due to primogeniture, Hugo did not inherit. Hugo is obviously the younger son. We'll call it a duke because we don't know. But Hugo is the younger son of the duke. The duke died. The duke's older son, Hugo's brother, inherits. And then, while his wife is pregnant, the duke dies. And that means that Hugo is going to be the new duke unless the baby is a boy. And so he has to wait with bated breath throughout the entire pregnancy, hoping that his brother fathered a girl. And as soon as the baby's little penis appears, Hugo has just lost the title,
the peerage, and
the estate, and all of the money. Hugo has just become poor. He lost all of his expectations. And so you see him telling Vera a lovely dinner that he loves her, he would like to marry her, but he is poor and he can't. And she does not say, and of course you wouldn't have a movie if you did this, you wouldn't have a novel if you did this. Vera does not say, we'll figure something out. No, she looks pensive while Hugo discusses the vagaries of fate and how if Cyril, who is a nice boy whom he cares about, he loves his nephew, that if Cyril had been a girl, Cynthia, then he would be the duke. He would be the duke. He would have all the money. He would have the title. He and Vera could get married happily ever after. Cyril is the only thing standing in the way to inheriting. And you can watch this and think, is Hugo being pensive and wistful and seeing that there could have been a different future, but he loves Cyril and this is what he's got? Or is he very subtly putting the idea in Vera's mind, because if she murders Cyril, however she does it, there's no blame on him. And of course, if Vera was not already bent, she would have said, we'll figure something out. Not a careful plan to let Cyril swim out to the rocks and drown and then heroically attempt to rescue him. See, it works both ways for Hugo.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want to accuse Vera. He does not want to accuse Vera of letting Cyril drown. Because for him, he's in a bind too. Not as big a bind as Vera is, obviously, but he's in a bind too. It has to look like a tragic accident for his own sake, because then there's no question that he was uninvolved. Because if he claims, oh my God, that bitch, murdered my nephew, forcing me to inherit, then Vera the bitch would say, but you told me you wanted him done. You wanted him out of the way. And then no matter what happened after that, he could deny all he wanted. The gossips would all say, I wonder what he actually told her. But if everyone agrees, including Hugo, that it was a tragic accident, he gets the peerage, he gets lots of sympathy, and he doesn't have to marry Vera. Instead, he can marry a nice girl of his own class, whom he knows is not a murderess. So Hugo wins whatever happens.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever happens, Hugo wins. This is the only adaptation we've seen in which Hugo tells Vera that it was a vagary of fate that made sure that I didn't inherit. If Cyril had been a girl, I would be the peer and we could marry.
It's the only time we actually saw how strong of a suggestion this is, that we could think, is he proposing something to her? Is he
Yes,
putting it
is he
otherwise
proposing?
we never said, we never had this before.
We've never had this before.
And I think this is a kind of an idea about how good Agatha Christie is. And this is where good fiction really shines, where there can be certain points where there's a little ambiguity in place, where if you know characters, you can say, have a conversation like this.
Oh, yes, because, you're watching Vera, and it's one thing for her as the governess nursery maid for Cyril, making sure that he's happy, that he's clean, that he's taken care of, that he's fed, everything that his mother doesn't want to bother with because, hey, she's rich. Rich women in England at that time, every child was essentially raised by nannies. So if she's a nice girl, for her, Hugo is a catch, even if he is a younger son and he isn't going to inherit huge amounts of money. He is a catch. And she cares very much about Hugo. But it could be so much more. But obviously, if she chooses to drown Cyril, so it's kind of accidental. She didn't actually murder him with her own hands. She didn't strangle the little brat. She has to be already bent to be able to do this.
It takes a certain amount of coldness. They show it very nicely because there's a scene in which Cyril runs out of the bathhouse, the bath tent for the ocean, and she takes her seat in a chair, but the chair is not overlooking the beach.
Yes, she turns away. She turns her attention to something else just to see what would happen. And this is, she has been with this kid for years. She knows he wants to swim out to the rocks. She should be watching him, and she deliberately turns away just to see what would happen. And if nothing happens, well, nothing happens. And if Cyril swims out to the rocks, it was a tragic accident, and she had nothing to do with it. And that's how she would self-justify. Mm-hmm. That is exactly how she would self-justify. So when Cyril, of course, swims out to the rocks and drowns, she doesn't get what she wanted. Vera does not get what she wanted because Hugo knows that she did it. The Sarah Phelps version did a much better way of explaining that because Hugo knows what a good swimmer that she is, that she delayed. Hugo figures this out pretty quickly. And, but this Hugo, the Russian Hugo, he's probably thrilled to pieces. He's sad. He lost his nephew, whom he was fond of, but he has now inherited, and he also knows that Vera cannot be trusted because this would always be an issue between them. Could he trust her? Could he trust her not to quietly poison his tea? And the answer to that is you don't know.
Yes, reply hazy, ask
reply
again
hazy,
lazy.
Ask again later. Maybe after she had 2 sons, so she had the heir and the spare to make sure that the title remained in her direct line. Mm-hmm. This is why it's so worth seeing all of the adaptations of any given Agatha Christie novel, is you don't know what the scriptwriter and the director are going to focus on. And I've not seen this in 10 adaptations. Yeah. And this one, you see Hugo seducing Vera and Vera leaping for it. Mm-hmm. He doesn't tell her what to do. He doesn't even tell her, I'll marry you if you kill that little brat. He doesn't say anything. He just talks wistfully about how if only Cyril, I love Cyril, my nephew, but if he hadn't been born, I would be the Duke and we could be married.
And then that's it.
And that's
it's a beautiful piece of restrained writing.
Oh, absolutely wonderful.
Yeah. But this is the 10 times that we've seen this, and it's been quite an amazing journey.
They're all so different.
They're all so different, and they all have the central core there, and it was all worthwhile, I think.
Oh, yes. And if you don't know the story, and of course, everybody listening to this podcast now knows how it ends. But if you are coming to this particular movie for the first time, and you have not read the novel and you haven't seen any of the other movies, it really follows along quite nicely, and you will be shocked when it turns out that the judge did it. Mm-hmm. You will be shocked. Yeah. And that's true with every one of these. If you don't know the story, you'll be shocked. Yeah. Because Agatha led you down the primrose path, just like the judge is leading everyone down the primrose path, and Hugo led Vera down the primrose path, and you will believe what you're told, and then you will find out everything you believed was wrong. Yeah. When it ended, there's Vera, walking back up to her room. There's a lot more psychology. You get a lot more Vera psychology in the novel because she is eating herself out with guilt and grief. And in fact, in the novel, again, if you're coming to this for the very first time, you really believe it was a tragedy, not she wanted an accident to happen, and it did. She arranged for an accident to happen. So you really believe in Vera's lack of guilt. She sees the noose hanging in her room and the chair placed under it, and she knows whoever it is that's still alive. This is after she triple taps Lombard. She recognized who she could seduce. And so she is insisting that they drag Dr. Armstrong's body up out of the waves. And while they're doing that, she lifts the gun from his pocket and then she shoots him.
Mm-hmm.
And Lombard realizes he made a mistake in trusting that woman, letting that woman get near to him.
Yep.
She goes up to her room, but you don't see the psychological horror which you get in the novel. That's I think, a minor flaw, because she should have been, Cyril is dead. I shot Lombard. Everyone is dead. I'm the only person alive on this island, but Cyril is dead, and I've lost Hugo, and oh my God, I just can't live with any of this. And she's in this almost a fugue state when she climbs the stairs to her room, and there's the noose and the chair underneath it waiting for her. Someone put this up. And that was the reason, by the way, for the seaweed, too.
Right.
The seaweed is to remind her she drowned Cyril. And, the body comes back up covered with seaweed, or it's just a reminder of, what can happen.
Yeah.
Then you discover that the judge did it, and you get a summation from the judge. And they did a little something different here with the judge. When the judge shoots himself, instead of doing it through the front of his head, he's doing it through the side, and then the pistol will drop from his hand. You don't get any havey-cavey stuff where he's trying to set it up to look like
another murder,
because it could be suicide. The way he does it, it's ambiguous. It could be somebody shooting him through the side of the head while he's sitting in the chair, or it could be himself shooting through the side of his head, because if the hand is down and the gun is there and there's no suicide note, was it murder or was it suicide?
It's a big mess.
And but what the police would know when they show up is this is a big mess.
Yeah.
And they find a lot of bodies. They find 10 bodies in all. Could the judge have died last by his own hand after killing everyone? He's a respected judge. This seems really unlikely.
Actually, it sounds like a subject of a great nonfiction book by a forensic scientist. How would you investigate this particular scene, and what would it show you? Because you'd have to try to figure out the order, try to figure out from the decay which bodies are the oldest, if you can place them in any kind of order. What clues would you be able to divine? It would be Wow, it would be a pretty interesting book.
If I remember correctly, in the novel, when you have the epilogue where the police are discussing the case,
yeah,
they have kind of figured out who was killed when, and they're basing this partly on diary entries. Because Emily Brent, a spinster, kept a diary. So did Vera. They kept a diary. Blore kept a journal. I seem to remember that there were various people who made notes. They kept notes of what was happening, so they were able to, reading the journal entries and kind of putting a timeline on the bodies. But again, after several days, how are you going to know that this one was killed not 12 hours before the other two, but 12 hours after the other two? A week later, I don't know that you can tell.
Well, it also depends on the year this takes place, too, because then that tells you the level of forensic science that you have available.
Well, the Russians they used all of the names. They really did change very little, and it is obviously from the clothes and the cars. This is a late 1930s setting. Mm-hmm. So it would have been late 1930s forensics, and I don't know that you would be able to tell with late 1930s forensics who died first, other than what you are given in the diary entries.
And of course, it also depends on when does the next boat come out.
Yeah, when does the next...
We have no idea.
Yeah, you have no idea when the next boat is coming out. And some of the bodies were put in the cold larder, which retards deterioration. So again, you don't know. And the two bodies that are down by the water, Lombard and Dr. Armstrong, you're assuming that you're still even going to be able to find them, that the surf isn't going to wash them out. And of course, after they have been gnawed on by crabs and the ocean water, there's not going to be a lot to tell you anything about how they died other than finding the bullets in Lombard's body.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fascinating subject. There.
So, yeah, what did the police do with the forensics of the time? And with the forensics in the Japanese one, I think they were able to work some of it out.
Well, but also the judge there wanted everybody to know. He put cameras everywhere.
Oh, yes, that's right.
He gave his speech at the end before he kills himself.
His villain's monologue.
His villain's monologue. There's variations on this, because that one, he wanted everybody to know what happened, and you could piece the timeline together just from the tapes and the time logs.
But yes, when the police show up at the Sparrow's Nest in this adaptation, they aren't going to know any of that, because also you do not see the judge writing anything down and putting that message in a bottle and throwing it over the side of the cliff into the oceans. You see nothing.
Yeah.
The judge tells the audience, but only the audience knows. And so when the police arrive, they know nothing except that they've got a number of bodies. And if they do a huge amount of investigation of each person and they play that record, they'll do a huge amount of investigation after playing that record and match things up, and they might be able to figure out who bought Sparrow's Nest. They might be able to figure that out. If they can figure out who paid for Sparrow's Nest and they learn it was the judge, then they start getting an idea of who might have put this together. But if they cannot determine who bought Sparrow's Nest, which is the name of that fabulous castle on the edge of the cliff, if they figure out who bought Sparrow's Nest, then they have a good fighting chance of figuring out who's behind it. But if they can't, it will always remain unsolved.
Yeah. Now, of all these, which is the best?
Ooh. Okay.
I know I didn't prep you for this, so you don't have a chance to actually sit there.
Okay. If you want to watch the stage play, watch the 1946 version.
45.
Or 45. Watch the 1945 version if you want to watch the stage play. If you want the closest to the novel, take this one or the Japanese version. If you want aspects of the stage play so that you see the seduction of the judge, then you want Sarah Phelps. But you can safely skip Gumnam, which has its own charms. Laser beam shooting statues, Easter Island style statues. And boy, that was really different. They all have
the dance sequence there. That's what she's talking about. Yes. Murder with dancing.
Singing and dancing. The others, the 1965 Hugh O'Brien, well, you get to see Hugh O'Brien, and there are some good scenes in that. There really are some good scenes in that Schloss, but a lot of it is they spent too much time in the snow, lost in the snow. The 1974 one was stupid. The 1989 one was stupider. God, what a waste when they could have taken full advantage of an African jungle set and had all kinds of terrible Tarzan-style traps to kill people. That was remarkably stupid.
Right. And then the French version.
The French version was a slasher flick.
Mm-hmm.
That was a slasher flick.
And it's far away. It still is close to the book, but it's uniquely French.
And they changed a lot of the characters. Virtually none of the characters transfer over other than Vera. Vera is the only one that transferred over, and the French version managed to make Vera even more evil and opportunistic than she was in any other version.
This was a vengeful Vera. And it was still good.
And it was still good. There was a lot to like about that. But I would say if you want to follow the novel, either this one or the Japanese one.
Interesting.
And if you want the stage play, the 1945 version.
Yeah.
If you want to combine them, then you have to watch Sarah Phelps, because Sarah Phelps, of course, doesn't do the police investigation, and she does the seduction of the judge, which you do not get in the novel. And you also do not get Vera confronting the judge. You get that in the stage play, not in the novel.
And you also get the final party scene.
Oh, yeah, she added that.
So she added that.
But it was still, there was a lot to like about that one, too. Boy, there was a lot to like. Again, I think because Sarah Phelps being English, she was really able to highlight the class divides between these people. Yeah. Her Emily Brent was just absolutely amazing, self-justifying and vindictive and utterly sure of her own righteousness and how cruel she is to both Mrs. Rogers and to Vera.
Right. That's right.
And the other men recognizing that Blore is not one of us.
Yeah.
And Lombard, they can't place. And there's this subtle contempt that they all have for Vera because, again, she's here as a secretary, a holiday post, because she is not their class dear.
Mm-hmm.
Because she's English, she's able to highlight those class divides that you don't see in the Japanese one. You don't see in the Russian one. You don't see that.
So you can sum it up like this, because traditional play, the 45 version.
Absolutely.
The Japanese and Russian version for the novel. And then the Sarah Phelps one if you want like a second generation reconsideration of Christie.
Yes, absolutely.
So there's 4 there I agree.
The don't waste your time with Hugh O'Brien or Oliver Reed or Frank Stallone or
the Bollywood one.
The Bollywood one, or even the French one, unless you want the slasher flick.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. Well, we are one away from finishing all the viewings the first time around for Agatha Christie She Watched.
Oh, that's right. Next weekend is going to be...
Why didn't they ask Evans?
Which
the
we have seen.
version. We've seen this twice already before, but this is the new version that Hugh Laurie...
Yes, we are going to see this one. We've seen it twice. We saw it with Miss Marple, and wow, they packed way too much plot into a 90-minute running time, and that solution came out of a ball field in China. And we all... And yes, Miss Marple, and Why Didn't They Ask Evans? God save us. Thank you, ITV, for stretching the limits of what can be done. Mm-hmm. And we also saw, it was Francesca Annis and James Warwick doing Why Didn't They Ask Evans? And that was so faithful to be almost dragging.
Right.
So I'm really looking forward to this Why Didn't They Ask Evans, because it's going to be different.
And we'll end the series on a high note.
Oh, absolutely.
We're going to go back and watch some of the older ones, some of the ones tied to our complete annotated lines, from Mysterious Affair at Styles to The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. But this is our first run, and we'll still do podcasts for those, so stick around and see what we'll be watching next. Absolutely.
And thanks so much for joining us, folks.
And we'll see you at the movies. Agatha Christie She Watched is Teresa Peschel and Bill Peschel, produced by Bill Peschel. New episodes come out every week wherever you stream your content. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can help support us by going to anchor.fm/mystery and leaving a 5-star rating and review, and by helping to spread the word. To advertise on Mystery She Watched, email Peschel at peschelpress.com. All questions and comments can be emailed to Peschel at peschelpress.com. And thank you for listening.